I'm Adam Richardson, and this is the Writers Detective Bureau. Welcome to episode 141 of the Writers Detective Bureau podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping authors and screenwriters write professional crime fiction. So happy New Year. Happy 2025. We know that we're in the future when Meta reveals that, Meta obviously is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. But when they revealed this week that they use AI profiles on their platform. Connor Hayes, Meta's VP of Generative AI, told the Financial Times that AI has a future on their platforms, engaging with the rest of us, including posting content and chatting. In other words, we won't know if the profile that we're interacting with is real or if it's Memorex. In the article, Connor said hundreds of thousands of AI characters have been created since the AI character tool went live. So to be clear, Meta released these profiles out onto Facebook and Instagram, but they've since deleted them. But this AI character profile thing is set to be rolled out again in the very near future to create engagement on the platform. So why does this matter to us? Why does it matter to you as an author or a screenwriter? Well, because these platforms are not only our advertising marketplaces, but they're where we're sharing our art with the world, which means putting on a brave face and a thick skin. Because as we all know, there'll be trolls out there in the interwebs. But let me ask you this. What if the next hateful reaction or bad review on whatever platform is out there, whether Meta owns it or not, because if one does this, you can bet the others will too. But what if the next time you get a bad review or someone leaves a trolling comment on something you post, what if that was simply an AI profile looking to boost engagement? Nothing to do with you, just a mathematical decision to post something that will increase the likelihood someone else will react to it. How would you feel? Would it hurt just as badly knowing it was just an AI bot specifically designed to stoke the fire? Or would you still take it personally? Would an AI bot with zero emotion be able to push your button to ignite emotions that make you question whether you should be making art or publishing your work at all? If we remove the emotion, it shouldn't. It isn't logical, right? It's a computer trying to stoke a fire of engagement that has nothing to do with your work. Fuck that thing. Am I right? It doesn't know you. It doesn't know how much blood, sweat, and tears it actually takes to make something. The AI just sees language as a set of numerical values. Literally, that's how these generative AI language learning models work. So why should you care what it thinks? And just like the AI, the real trolls, the real humans that post the same crap, don't know you or your effort. Just like AI, what they post says more about who they are than what you create, and certainly who you might possibly be. When I was a rookie on patrol, my FTO told me that when someone is in my face and yelling at me, they weren't yelling at me. They were yelling at the badge I was wearing, yelling at what that badge represents. They don't know me. They don't even know my first name. I mean, if they can read, they can probably figure out my last name since it's on my uniform, but they don't know a single thing about me other than I'm there and it's most likely a really bad day for them. And I'm obviously an easy target. And when you put yourself in the arena, you're an easy target too. Your work, your art, your writer's profile, your Goodreads page, none of it is personal. None of it is real. Remember this, don't let the trolls, whether real or AI, keep you from achieving your goals in 2025. This is the year we all stop playing small. Let's get after it. So speaking of not playing small, 2025 is going to be a big year for the Writers Detective Bureau. I'm going to be leaning in heavily on video. Yep, doing the YouTuber thing. I played around with it a little before, and I'm taking out the stops that were roadblocks. And I highly suggest you look at your workflows as well. What is the stuff that gets in your way? What's going to make it easier to produce content, whether that's your writing or something else, your art? And for me, part of it is also the way I've set up this podcast. Don't worry, the podcast is going to continue, but it may not be in that same Q&A format. I've kind of on my own, put myself in the hole where I feel like I need to have 3 questions to answer every time I sit down to record, and I have stuff that I want to be able to, um, talk about and share and teach that doesn't necessarily have to come from a writer's question. I'm not going to pull the Dear Abby or Ann Landers thing of creating my own questions to answer, like putting on a fake name or anything like that. Sorry, Ann and Abby. I don't mean to pull back the veil if that is what actually happens. But my whole point is that I want to show up for you in a much more frictionless way. So that way you get to know me a little bit better. I get to create the content that I want and not feel so pigeonholed into just answering 3 questions every podcast episode. And to be honest, because I've not been consistent with the posting, I don't have the questions coming in. So I'd like to be able to kind of go back to basics and start drilling down deeper into some of the topics that I think when you go searching for them, you'll be able to find that there's an answer there. Because one of the cool things about doing this is being able to share my experiences, but I also get a lot of the same questions over and over again. And I made a conscious decision a long time ago to answer the same question repeatedly, but use that as a way to jump off into, if I've already answered one very similar topic, I may have gone down one rabbit hole, and this time I'm going to go down a different rabbit hole. It'll obviously be related, but it gives me a chance to kind of expand on a previous answer. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And I also want to be able to use real life examples, things from the news that we can then learn lessons from, and hopefully teach you how to be able to spot the same kinds of things. When we're watching a press release or reading the latest article on something that has happened, sometimes we just kind of take it at face value. We don't really look at it from an analytical standpoint, with our writer's research hat on to be able to discern, oh, this is how these 3 agencies cracked a case together. So, we'll start looking at real life cases and that kind of stuff. Not in the true crime front, because I'm not a big proponent of kind of re-victimizing families by going over a case for my own financial benefit. Not to, comment on true crime junkies, but that's just not my thing. I think that, one example of this, let's do this right now. One of the recent headlines we have undoubtedly encountered, you have undoubtedly encountered, was the recent murder of a health insurance CEO by a suspect. You all know which case I'm talking about, but using a ghost gun. So I don't normally talk about guns on the podcast since our digital overlords tend to not like that kind of talk. But I've covered this topic in detail in my crime fiction guns course. But I thought I'd explain what they mean when they say in the media or in the law, a ghost gun, and why a ghost gun may be an option for your antagonist. Let's start with a very brief and very simplified chat about regular handguns, and then we'll get into how ghost guns differ. The handguns you see on nearly every movie poster, every TV show, I'm dating myself by saying movie poster, every Netflix thumbnail has that. On a so very often it is a semi-automatic pistol made by a reputable manufacturer. These are normally those black-looking handguns that you will see. Technically they're blued, that's a whole other, or the other kind of Cerakote coating. I'm not going to bore you with all the minutia. That's part of the problem talking about guns is so many people know so much more and get into the details, and they take it so personally that I'm going to get hate mail because I said use one description instead of another. So anyway, the vast majority of handguns that are certainly carried by cops in the United States or around the world at this point, unless they're really, really old and they're using a revolver, but the vast majority are semi-automatic pistols made by a reputable manufacturer like Beretta, Glock, Sig Sauer, Smith & Wesson, and the list goes on. That semi-automatic handgun is obviously made up of a bunch of moving parts and static parts. And one of those parts is legally required to be stamped with a serial number by the manufacturer for tracking purposes. Now, I'm being intentionally vague about the serialized part because there are so many exceptions that might get confusing. So using our semi-automatic pistol as an example, let's say a Glock 9mm, The part that is serialized is the frame or the lower receiver. And for those not super familiar with handguns, this is the lower half of the gun, if you will, that the trigger and the removable magazine are housed within. And then the barrel lives on the slide, which is the top half of the gun. And that's the part that, wait for it, slides along the top of this frame or slides along the lower receiver with the serial number on it. But every gun is different. Sig Sauer introduced the P320 9mm handgun in the last few years, and a few different variations in the P300 series that has a serial number as part of what Sig calls the FCU, or Fire Control Unit, which is essentially an entire trigger assembly that can be dropped into or swapped between different frames, slides, and barrels. It's a very clever design, actually. But the point is that the serial number locations can vary widely depending on the type and model of the gun. But that serial number is then tracked from the gun's, for lack of a better term, birth at the factory. When all of the parts are assembled, including the part with the serial number, and shipped from the factory to a gun store or a military branch or a police department, that serial number is registered with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, better known as the ATF. Modern handguns, however, are quite modular. You can buy almost any kind of aftermarket replacement part you could possibly want or need for your gun. Different barrels, triggers, springs, firing pins, you name it. So how do ghost guns differ? Well, remember when I said that a serial number is tracked at the gun's birth? The real question is, at what point in the build process is a manufacturer required to add the serial number? When the part is 100% complete, 95% complete, 80% complete? You can't buy a frame from Glock that is not fully complete with a stamped serial number on it. You can, however, buy a generic, i.e. non-Glock made frame that is almost complete. It's made by, whomever, third-party companies. We're not talking OEM parts here. But because it wasn't yet fully complete, it wasn't legally required to be stamped with a serial number and registered. Think of it as another part that still needs to finish the manufacturing process. So these unfinished lower receivers were legally sold right up until August of 2022. So if you were to buy one of these unfinished lower receiver kits, you just needed to use a drill or a drill press to drill out a few holes to quote unquote finish your new lower receiver. Assuming you had all the other unregulated aftermarket parts that were required, you could build your own ghost gun in well under an hour, all without a background check or having your gun registered in any country. I've even seen lower receivers built using 3D printers. Since August of 2022, these lower receiver kits are required to have a serial number, and the seller must hold an FFL, a federal firearms license, which basically means the seller must be a licensed gun dealer and purchasers must go through the background check process. Those ghost gun kits now must go through the same rules as commercially manufactured firearms. But I am sure there are still tens of thousands, if not more, ghost guns or ghost gun kits still available for your antagonist to procure in an illicit kind of way. Or you could always have your antagonist get a gun that isn't traceable back to him the old-fashioned way, by stealing one. If you'd like to learn more about ghost guns, I've included a link in the show notes at writersdetective.com/141. So this is a short one, trying to make sure I punch them out a lot more often and answer the questions and cover the topics that we want, or that you want. You're still able to send me questions by going to writersdetective.com/, spit it out, Adam, writersdetective.com/ask. And I'm also going to be doing videos, YouTube videos. I started doing them and, I got kind of hung up on the production side of things. Now that in 2025, there's a thing called grandpa vlogging. Yeah, I'm totally leaning into that. I'm not a grandpa. I am a grand uncle. I'm not a grandpa. But I am just going to turn on the camera, start talking, and then maybe throw in a little bit of diagrams and B-roll if it helps. But I'm not going to go overly into the production stuff just because it took me 3 hours to add a timer to a video last night, how to figure out how to do that in Premiere. So yeah, I'm just going to sit in front of the camera, start talking, explaining stuff, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But most importantly, I just want to help you in your writing. So I will see you next week. Have a great week and write well.